Let's go.
Deep in the Sinai Peninsula, the ancient Egyptian empire ran massive, remote turquoise mining operations, like Serabit el-Khadim. Roughly 3,500 years ago, someone carved a series of symbols into the walls here. This script, called Proto-Sinaitic, is widely recognized as the world's very first 22-letter phonetic alphabet. For decades, historians have agreed on a single origin story. They argue this alphabet was invented from the bottom up by illiterate Semitic miners trying to sound out their native language. According to this consensus, these uneducated laborers looked at complex Egyptian hieroglyphs, borrowed a few shapes like an ox or a house, and assigned them simple phonetic sounds. Think about the claim being made here. The accepted historical narrative suggests that the foundational system for converting human sound into a standardized written code was merely an accidental byproduct of manual labor in a dark cave. The physical evidence left at the site challenges this narrative. Looking at these reddish-brown stelae, the carvings are highly structured and intentional, not the crude scratchings of people inventing language on the fly. Modern translations of artifacts like Sinai 357 reveal sophisticated, poetic sentence structures, including precise references to Semitic liturgical calendars, like Abib. You cannot draft complex poetry or track liturgical cycles using a language you are actively guessing at. This level of literary execution requires a fully mature, established operating system. The people carving these stones already knew exactly how to read and write. The sophistication of these inscriptions suggests a deliberate engineering process, one that likely required the literacy and resources of an educated elite mind, embedded within the Egyptian royal court. To find that engineer, we have to leave the mines and enter the highly restricted, fiercely guarded royal courts of the Egyptian Middle Kingdom. This brings us to the historical figure of Joseph. Strip away the Sunday school framing, and the ancient texts actually describe an elite Semitic administrator operating at the absolute peak of Egyptian statecraft. Take his famous coat of many colors. If you decode the original Hebrew morphological root, ketonet pasim, it doesn't translate to a colorful coat. It means a tunic that reaches the palms of the hands. In the ancient Near East, a long-sleeved garment was a highly specific physical uniform. It marked the wearer as a master scribe, an official who managed data, and was entirely exempt from manual labor. When Pharaoh elevates Joseph, he gives him an imperial title, Zaphaneth Paneah. In literal Hebrew translation, that name means the cracker of the hidden code. We have a Semitic official walking the halls of the Egyptian palace, wearing the uniform of a data manager, carrying a title that officially identifies him as a master cryptographer. The forensic profile matches perfectly. Joseph's marriage to Asenath, daughter of the priest of On, provided him with direct access to the Temple of On, the administrative center for over 800 complex hieroglyphs. He took that overcomplicated visual database and stripped away the pagan imagery. By extracting just the pure phonetic sounds, he condensed hundreds of chaotic pictures into a lean 22-character system. He built a democratized operating system for human language, and he had the legal power to deploy it. When Pharaoh handed Joseph his royal signet ring, the Chotam, he handed over total control of the scribal bureaucracy. No decree could be written without his authorization. Ancient Hebrew records, specifically Psalm 81, pinpoint this exact administrative shift. The text states that a new written testimony, an iyut, was established the moment Joseph went out over Egypt and encountered an unfamiliar language. Joseph possessed the scribal expertise, the cryptographic insight, and the supreme legal authority required to authorize a new script and bypass the elite gatekeeping of the Egyptian priesthood. If Joseph engineered and taught this new script to his Semitic family in Egypt, the physical archaeology should reflect that. We should see his descendants using it at state-run mining operations in the Sinai Desert. Recently, epigraphic researchers like Dr. Douglas Petrovich have been analyzing the exact carvings left on specific Middle Kingdom stelae, particularly the artifact known as Sinai 115. Cut into the face of Sinai 115 is a specific name. It reads Manasseh, the firstborn son of Joseph. Finding the name of Joseph's own son, written in the very script Joseph was positioned to create, links the administrative power of the royal court to the specific inscriptions found in the desert. The alignment of the physical stelae, the historical records, and the Hebrew text suggests that the accidental minor theory fails to account for the structural sophistication found in the Sinai. The 22-letter alphabet was an engineered technology, compiled and smuggled out of an elite empire by a Hebrew slave turned prince. This democratized operating system was built to break the gatekeeping of empires, putting the power of the written word into the hands of the entire world.
If you look at the very beginning of the Gospel of John in the Christian New Testament, there's this verse that basically sets the stakes for the entire cosmos.
Right, John 1.1.
Yeah, exactly. John 1.1. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God."
It's a massive statement. I mean, profoundly theological.
It really is. It basically says that the ultimate reality of the universe, like the Creator himself, is intrinsically tied to communication, to this idea of the word.
Right. And within that specific theological framework, it explicitly says that Jesus is the manifestation of that word, in the physical world.
But here's the thing that almost nobody ever stops to think about.
Which is?
If the ultimate goal of history was to record the word so that every single human being could read it and, internalize it, the world had a massive technological problem.
Oh, absolutely. A huge bottleneck.
Because thousands of years ago, the operating system for writing was completely broken. I mean, it was a total monopoly.
It was heavily gatekept.
Exactly. If you wanted to write something down in the ancient world, specifically in the superpower of Egypt, you couldn't just tap out 26 letters on a keyboard. You were locked into an absolute gated community of knowledge.
It was basically the definition of a high-security information vault. And, well, that is exactly what we're exploring today.
Yes, it is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a topic that completely reimagines one of the most foundational technologies in human history.
The alphabet.
The alphabet, the very letters you and I use every single day. And we have a massive stack of sources on the table for this one.
We really do. Some incredibly dense material here.
I'm talking about linguistic audits, epigraphic research from ancient turquoise mines, deep strata biblical Hebrew metathesis, and these incredibly detailed thermodynamic text analyses.
Right, from that framework called the Torbot 303 key.
Exactly. And the mission for this deep dive, we're going to examine a radical new historical proposition found in these sources.
And it is radical.
It really is. The theory is that the biblical figure of Joseph, the guy with the coat of many colors who saved Egypt from a famine, didn't just manage grain silos.
Far from it, according to this data.
Right. The evidence suggests he literally engineered the first phonetic alphabet, what scholars call Proto-Sinaitic.
And he did it to completely democratize reading and writing for the common man.
Which is just a paradigm-shattering premise. I mean, it changes how we view the intersection of scripture, history, and human communication.
It forces you to rethink almost everything about how language evolved.
Now, before we really get into the weeds here, I do want to give a quick but important disclaimer to you listening.
Always a good idea with this kind of material.
Yeah. The sources we are unpacking today contain some profound scriptural, historical, and, potentially debated theological framework.
Heavy stuff, for sure.
But our goal here is not to take a side. We aren't pastors, we aren't politicians, and we aren't here to endorse a specific religious or academic dogma.
Right. We're just here to look at the data.
Exactly. We are simply here to impartially unpack the incredible data, the linguistic math, and the patterns found in this source material.
Just presenting the evidence.
We're going to lay out the physical and scriptural evidence exactly as the research presents it, so you can weigh it all and come to your own conclusions.
That's really the best way to approach this.
Yeah.
Because the raw data itself is just astonishing to look at.
Okay, let's unpack this, because for a really long time, the mainstream academic consensus on how the alphabet was invented has been a totally different story.
Right, a very different narrative.
It's usually presented as this very bottom-up, almost accidental invention. The story goes that a group of illiterate Semitic miners were working out in the dark turquoise caves of the Sinai Peninsula.
Yeah, the classic illiterate miner theory.
Right, and they saw some complex Egyptian hieroglyphs on the walls, and they just sort of, guessed at how to simplify them into letters so they could keep track of their mining quotas.
It's been the standard textbook explanation for decades. I mean, everyone just accepted it.
but the Torbot 303 thermodynamic analyses in our sources argue that this theory violently contradicts a principle called combinatorial information efficiency.
It completely violates it, yep.
Whoa, hold on, you just lost me. Combinatorial information efficiency. What exactly does that mean in normal English?
Okay, think of it this way. To understand why a miner couldn't just invent an alphabet on his lunch break, you really have to understand the absolute control of the Egyptian scribal class.
Okay, setting the scene in Egypt.
Right. Hieroglyphs were not an alphabet like we have today. They were an elite repository of over 800 complex pictorial ideographic signs.
Wait, 800?
At least 800. And they were heavily gate-kept by the priesthood and the royal administration. You had to study for years just to understand a fraction of them.
So it wasn't something a random worker would just pick up?
Not at all. Furthermore, they were deeply steeped in pagan, idolatrous imagery. You didn't just read a hieroglyph to sound out a word.
You didn't?
No, you were interacting with a highly complex visual theology. A picture of an owl didn't just make an M sound right. It carried the conceptual weight of the entire culture and their gods.
Okay, I think I get it. It's like Egyptian hieroglyphs were this closed source, highly complex enterprise software.
Yes, exactly.
It's a system where only a tiny fraction of millionaire tech elites, in this case, the Egyptian scribes and priests, are even allowed to see the source code, let alone write in it.
That is a perfect analogy.
And if you're a commoner, you are completely locked out of the system. You can't participate in the flow of information at all.
Right. And here's where that combinatorial information efficiency principle comes in.
Okay, lay it on me.
The sources argue that if you have a massive, over-constrained database of 800 distinct images, it is mathematically and cognitively impossible for an uneducated person to just casually streamline it.
Because there's just too much data to sort through.
Exactly. To look at that massive wall of gate-kept data, strip away all the pagan visual baggage, and isolate exactly 22 abstract phonetic constants, the universal seeds of human sound, it requires an incredibly advanced top-down understanding of linguistics.
So you're saying you don't just stumble into the alphabet. You don't just sort of guess your way into 22 perfect letters?
You don't do it by accident in a cave, no. It requires a master cryptographer.
Wow.
It requires someone with a macro understanding of cross-linguistic phonology and statecraft, someone who can see the whole board.
And the sources connect this directly to what they call the Logos protocol, right? Going back to that John 1.1 concept we started with.
Exactly. The researchers proposed that before the Logos, the living word, could ever manifest in physical flesh on Earth, the world needed an infrastructure that could handle it.
It needed a new operating system.
Right. It needed a compressed, stable, and highly democratic operating system to preserve its digital data sequence on an earthly substrate.
Because the hieroglyphs just couldn't do the job.
The Egyptian system was too heavy, too restrictive, and too tied to visual idols. The language literally had to be purified.
It had to be wiped clean of all that baggage.
Exactly. The alphabet was the necessary precursor to the word, designed so that all people could know truth directly without needing a priest to interpret an image for them.
Okay, but let me push back here because this is the glaring question that comes to mind.
Sure, go ahead.
If we look at the biblical narrative in the book of Genesis, Joseph is essentially the ancient equivalent of the Secretary of Agriculture.
Right, the grain guy.
Yeah. He has a knack for interpreting dreams. He gets out of prison, and Pharaoh puts him in charge of managing grain silos during a massive famine.
That's the story we all know.
So how does the grain guy suddenly become a master software engineer of human language? I mean, that's a massive leap.
That is exactly the question we should be asking.
Yeah.
And it leads us directly into the political and structural realities of Joseph's position in the Egyptian court.
Because he wasn't just managing wheat.
Far from it. The sources point out that Joseph possessed two vital things. First, a precise systemic understanding of reality.
Which is mentioned in the New Testament, right?
Yes, the book of Acts, chapter 7, refers to this as Sophia, or divine structural wisdom.
Sophia.
And second, he had the absolute legal and administrative authority to execute this massive linguistic overthrow.
Okay, let's break that down. Walk me through the actual mechanics of this. Where does Joseph even get the data to start dismantling the hieroglyphs?
Right, the access issue.
Because if it's a closed source system, like you said, he needs access to the mainframe. He can't just guess the passwords.
He gets it through a very specific political marriage.
Oh, really?
Yes. If you look at Genesis 41.45, the text says Pharaoh gave Joseph a wife, a Senath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On.
Okay, priest of On. Now, the ancient city of On is better known as Heliopolis, isn't it?
Heliopolis, exactly.
What was the significance of that city? Why does that matter?
Heliopolis was the intellectual center of the ancient world. It was the beating heart of Egypt's elite scribal and theological apparatus.
So it's not just some random farm town.
Not at all. Think of it as the MIT and the Vatican of ancient Egypt rolled into one.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
By marrying Asenath, Joseph isn't just making a political alliance. Asenath is a direct scion of the ultimate gatekeepers of the hieroglyphic data vaults.
So she's basically handing him the keys to the server room.
Exactly. The research we're looking at refers to this as the Asenath pipeline.
The Asenath pipeline. I love that term.
Through this marriage, Joseph is granted total, unhindered access to the complex 800-plus sign system. He has the ingestion pipeline to study the entirety of the Egyptian code.
But having the data is one thing. I mean, I can have all the data in the world on how the IRS works, but that doesn't mean I have the legal power to rewrite the tax code.
Fair point.
So how does Joseph get the authority to decree an entirely new writing system across the whole empire?
That authority is given to him just a few verses earlier, actually. In Genesis 41.41 through 44,
What happens there?
Pharaoh takes off his royal signet ring and puts it on Joseph's hand. In biblical Hebrew, that ring is called the chatham.
The chatham. Okay.
And the Torbot 303 framework analyzes this not just as a piece of fancy royal jewelry, but as a literal, physical, cryptographic hardware device.
Right, because in the ancient world, you don't sign a state document with a pen.
No, you don't.
You seal it with hot wax or clay and press the ring into it. The ring is your password. It's your two-factor authentication.
Precisely. The chatham is the ultimate structural constraint in the empire. To hold that ring meant Joseph was the absolute head of the royal scribal bureaucracy.
He was the boss of all the scribes.
The biblical text explicitly says that Pharaoh told Joseph, "Without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt."
Meaning no one can do business without his approval, no trade, no taxes.
It goes deeper than just business. Lifting the hand meant wielding the pen or the chisel.
Wait, really? The physical act of writing?
Yes. No elder, no priest, no scribe could ink a piece of papyrus or engrave a stone monument without Joseph's direct clearance.
That is absolute power over the flow of information.
He possessed the absolute legal, political, and administrative authority to authorize a new people's script and deploy it across the state.
That brings up a fascinating detail in the sources about Joseph's hands, because the theme of the hand seemed to follow him everywhere.
It really does. It's a recurring motif.
We all know the famous story of Joseph's coat of many colors from his youth, right? Genesis 37.3, the Kitanat Pasim.
Yes, the famous coat.
But the linguistic audit in our stack reveals that this coat was not just a colorful fashion statement to make his brothers jealous.
Far from it.
It actually identified him as an elite administrator of the pas.
Yes, the pas. In Hebrew, pas represents the extremity of the body, specifically the palm or the writing hand.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is how the researchers use deep strata Hebrew metathesis to unlock the hidden mechanics of these words.
Wait, hold on. Metathesis. I mean, what even is that? That term pops up a lot in these sources, but before we go further, explain what metathesis is for the listener.
Ah, right. So metathesis is essentially the reversing or rearranging of root letters in a word to find its mechanical opposite.
Like stripping it down to the basics.
Exactly. Ancient Hebrew is a highly structured, almost mathematical language built on 2- or 3-letter roots. The Torbot 303 researchers apply what they call a bilateral stripping protocol.
Which sounds super complicated.
It sounds like it, but it just means stripping away the vowels and extra letters to find the 2 core consonant seeds of a word.
Okay, finding the seed letters. Got it.
By looking at those 2 seeds and then reversing them, you can see the inverse structural function.
Give me an example of how that works, like with Joseph's code in the writing hand.
Sure. Let's look at the Hebrew root for the act of writing, counting, and recording. So if you look at the Strong's Concordance, specifically H5608, you get the word sapher.
Okay, sapher, H5608.
Now, if you run that bilateral stripping protocol on sapher, isolating the core mechanics, you get the consonant sounds S and P.
Okay, SP.
Now, what is the exact structural inverse of the continuous data block being recorded? What is the tool that executes the action?
You reverse it.
Exactly. You reverse SP and you get PS, the pass, the biological hand that executes the writing.
Oh, wow.
The sources suggest that the Kitanat Pasim, the code of the pass, was a literal administrative uniform marking Joseph as the master of the writing hand long before he ever reached the throne room in Egypt.
So if we step back and paint this picture for a second,
Let's do it.
Joseph isn't just a guy who had some lucky prophetic dreams in a prison cell. He is meticulously elevated to become the ultimate chief information officer of the most powerful empire on earth.
CIO of Egypt.
Exactly. He has the raw data through the SNF pipeline. He has the administrative password and legal authority through the Chotham signet ring.
Right.
And he has the structural wisdom to dismantle those 800 Egyptian ideograms and extract the 22 universal phonetic seeds.
And this isn't just inferred from his job description. The scriptural text actually hides a precise phonosemantic transistor, an information compression protocol inside the very names given to Joseph during this transition.
Okay, this is where the linguistic math in the source documents gets absolutely wild, and I want to make sure we take our time walking through this.
It's dense, but it's incredible.
In Genesis 41.45, Pharaoh doesn't just give Joseph a ring and a wife, he gives him a new Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah.
Yes, Zaphanath-Paneah. Now, Egyptologists have debated the late Egyptian phonetic translations of this name for a long time.
They argue about what it meant in Egyptian.
Right. But the sources point out that the Holy Spirit recorded this name in Hebrew letters in the biblical text, creating a profound structural wordplay.
A cipher in the text.
Exactly. The translation of Zaphanath-Paneah essentially breaks down to the cracker of the hidden code, or the one who controls the medium of life.
I love that. The cracker of the hidden code. That sounds like a hacker handle.
It really does.
And the second half of that translation, the medium of life, connects directly to a very famous Egyptian hieroglyph, right? The pa'ank.
Exactly. In the Egyptian language, P3, or pa, is the definite article, meaning they. And ankh is the primordial symbol for life or living force.
We've all seen the ankh, right? It looks like a cross with a loop at the top.
Yeah, you see it on every mummy case. The Hebrew transliteration Paneah perfectly captures this phonetic sequence. It identifies him as the controller of the living force.
So that's the back half of the name. But the first half of the name, Zaphanath, is where the cryptographic math lives.
That's where the magic happens.
Break down the Hebrew root for Zaphanath for us, because this blew my mind when I read it.
Okay, the root word behind Zaphanath is Saphan, which is Strong's number H6845.
Sapham, H6845.
It means to hide, to encrypt, to conceal, or to lay up and store. So you have a state of deep encryption.
Like locking something away.
Right. In the Torbot 303 framework, which looks at text almost like thermodynamics, they call this an M-state constraint.
Like mass.
Yeah.
Something solid, heavy, and locked away.
Exactly. Like a block of ice. The Egyptian hieroglyphic system was Saphan, locked away, heavy, and inaccessible to the common man.
Because it was gate-kept.
Now remember what we said about metathesis. If you run a 180-degree trilateral inversion on Saphan, if you literally reverse the Hebrew letters, you get the word nafats.
And what does nafats mean?
Nafats means to shatter, to burst, or to break open.
Oh, wow. It's the exact opposite.
It is a violent release of kinetic energy. The framework calls this a Q-state expansion, like turning that block of ice into steam.
So it just bursts outward.
So when Pharaoh names him Zaphanath-Paneah, he's literally naming Joseph as the cryptographic valve.
The valve that releases the pressure.
He is the human-machine component designed to take the highly encrypted, gate-kept magic of Egypt Saphan and shatter it open nafats so the common people can access the medium of life.
It is a literal 180-degree shift written right into his title. He is the one who shatters the code.
It's engineered right into the name.
But the sources don't stop there. They point to another scripture that pinpoints the exact physical mechanism of how this linguistic shift happened. It's in Psalm 81, verses 4 and 5.
A crucial piece of the puzzle.
It talks about a testimony established in Joseph when he went out over the land of Egypt. And then there's this incredible, almost mysterious phrase. It says, "Where I heard a language that I understood not," or as some translations say, an unfamiliar language.
This is one of the most vital nodes in the entire theory, because the text says God established a testimony, an edit, in Joseph.
An edit. What is that exactly?
Now, an edit is not just a passing story. It is a physical monument or a written law. It is a structural artifact.
Okay, something physical.
And in this exact verse, in Psalm 81, the Hebrew spelling of Joseph's name is altered. It's the only place in the entire Bible where his name is spelled this way.
Wait, really? The only place?
Yes. The Hebrew letter, he's inserted right into the middle of his name, transforming it from Yosef to Yehoshaphat.
The letter he. What is the significance of adding that specific letter in this thermodynamic framework?
In Hebrew pictography and phonetics, the letter, he represents an open vocalic emission. It is the symbol for breath.
Like exhaling.
Specifically, it represents divine breath, the uncontained kinetic exhalation of the Creator. God injects his own breath directly into the core of Joseph's identity.
And why? Why in that specific verse?
Because of that unfamiliar language. Joseph has to process the chaotic, heavily encrypted administrative data of Egypt.
And this is where the actual physics of speech and the mouth come into play, right? The source material breaks down the Hebrew word for language used in that verse.
Yes, and it's brilliant. The word used for language in Song 81.5 is Safa, which is Strong's number H8193.
Safa, H8193.
It translates to language, but its literal concrete meaning is the lip, the shore, or the boundary.
So a physical edge or container, like the shore of a river holding the water in.
Correct. It is a physical constraint and end-state structural boundary. Now, the job of the lip, the Safa, is to catch the formless, chaotic, raw breath.
The air coming out of your lungs.
In Hebrew, that raw exhaled breath is nafak, Strong's H5301. Nafak is uncontained kinetic exhalation.
Let me see if I am tracking this. You have the raw, formless air coming out of the lungs, the nafak.
Right.
And it hits the physical structural boundary of the lips, the safa.
Exactly.
And by shaping the lips, you cut the air into distinct sounds. You make letters. You make an alphabet.
Precisely. Joseph's mouth, his cognitive framework, became the safa boundary. He processed the chaotic, unfamiliar hieroglyphic data of Egypt through the divine breath of the field. He, in his name, and his lips outputted a clean 22-seed phonetic operating system.
He structured the air.
He gave a structural boundary to the living voice so that it could be captured and written down.
I just want you, the listener, to pause and imagine realizing this. Think about the magnitude of this claim.
It's massive.
Imagine realizing that the letters you use every day to text your friends, to write an email, or to jot down a grocery list, they were originally forged as a weapon.
A technological weapon.
They were engineered as a cryptographic key to take power away from an ancient, pagan elite class and give it directly to you. That is the ultimate open source revolution.
It is the democratization of human consciousness. It changed the world forever.
Now, this is amazing literary and linguistic math.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to look at the structural inversion of these words.
The math is very elegant.
But I know what you're thinking as you listen to this. Where is the physical proof?
Right, the hard evidence.
Because if this isn't just an abstract theory, if Joseph really did create an alphabet and distribute it to his people, there has to be something carved in stone somewhere. Did they leave receipts?
They absolutely left receipts. And the physical evidence of this alphabet in active, mature use is found exactly where we started this deep dive.
Back in the mines.
In the turquoise mines of the Sinai Peninsula, specifically at a site called Serabit el-Khadim.
Which is exactly the same place the academic consensus says those illiterate miners were just scribbling on the walls.
Yes, but when you look at the deep strata analysis of the Hebrew words involved, it tells a completely different story than guys guessing at pictures.
Okay, let's look at the words.
Let's look at the biblical Hebrew word for engraving or cutting a mark. The word is chakak, Strong's number H2706.
Chakak. H2706. What does that imply?
In its primary concrete sense, chakak doesn't mean writing with a reed pen and ink on a fragile piece of papyrus.
Which is what the Egyptian scribes usually did, right?
Right. Chakak means to hack, to engrave, to permanently incise a mark into a hard substrate like solid rock or stone.
Oh. And the scribes and lawmakers in ancient Israel, the ones responsible for the statutes, were literally called metchakak.
Yes.
Which translates to the mark cutters.
Exactly. They were the lawmakers who carved the decrees into stone. And this perfectly matches the technological reality of the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions left behind in the Middle and New Kingdom eras at the Sinai mining grids.
Because they weren't using ink.
These weren't ink scribbles. They were chakak permanently chiseled straight into the hard turquoise rock faces of the mountain.
Our sources bring up a specific inscription found at Serabit el-Khadim, designated as Sinai 357.
Sinai 357, yes. Very important piece of evidence.
Now, according to the epigraphic research in our stack, this isn't some random tally sheet of how many rocks were mined that Tuesday.
No, it's far too complex for that.
High-resolution studies reveal that Sinai 357 is a highly structured, poetic, and votive text. And crucially, it contains advanced Semitic calendar references. It explicitly mentions the month of Abib.
which is a massive piece of evidence.
Yeah.
The month of Abib is identical to the Passover timeline found later in the book of Exodus.
Exactly. If you have a highly structured liturgical poem that references the specific Semitic religious calendar, you are definitely not looking at the clumsy invention of a guy holding a chisel for the very first time.
Not at all.
You are looking at a mature, robust writing system used by a deeply literate Semitic population. They brought their established language, their calendar, and their faith into the desert with them.
And if that isn't enough to show the deep ties to Joseph's lineage, we have the bombshell epigraphic breakthrough regarding another inscription.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Sinai 115. This is a Middle Kingdom Egyptian stela found at the same Serabit el-Khadim mining temple.
And what's on it?
The research of epigrapher Dr. Douglas Petrovich identifies a very specific, undeniable name carved onto this stela, Manasseh.
Manasseh, Joseph's firstborn son.
Yes, Manasseh is literally carved into the rock. And the Torbot 303 framework evaluates the phonosemantic engineering of that specific name to show exactly why Manasseh is the one found carved in the stone of Sinai.
Okay, let's unpack the physics of the name Manasseh. Walk me through the roots.
If you strip the vowels from the Hebrew name Manasseh, you isolate the core by consonantal parent seed, the letters nun and shin, or na.
Nasesh?
Because
Okay.
the root word is nasha, which is Strong's number H5382.
And what does Nasha mean?
It means to cause a memory to dissolve, to fade away, or to forget. It is fluid, floating, unanchored.
Like letting something slip away.
And we see this explicitly in the text. When Joseph names his son, he says, God has made me forget all my toil.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
That is the forward action at the root. But remember the matrix lock we discussed. What happens when you apply metathesis and look at the exact operational inverse of dissolving a memory?
You reverse the letters, you flip the nun and the shin around, and you get shin nun.
And you get the word shin, which is Strong's number H8127.
Shin, H127.
Shin means a solid tooth or a crag of solid rock. It is the absolute solid state structural constraint. It is the opposite of a fading memory.
It's a memory carved in rock.
Precisely. So the mathematical dynamic of Manasseh's name dictates his structural function in history.
His destiny was in his name.
His role was to take the loose, floating memories of the Semitic people out of the fluid environment of Egypt and engrave them permanently, chakak, into the teeth of the rock, the shin, at the Sinai mines.
That is insane.
The machine code of his name perfectly matches the archaeological reality of where his name is actually found.
My mind is blown. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Tell me.
Because if Manasseh's the one executing the writing in the rock, does this connect back to the famous scene in Genesis 48 where Jacob blesses Joseph's sons?
Oh, the blessing scene, yeah.
Because I remember reading that story, and the text makes a massive, almost awkward point out of the fact that Jacob crosses his hands when he prays for them.
It absolutely connects. The Torbot 303 framework calls this the hand-cross transistor.
The hand-cross transistor?
When Jacob positions Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, he deliberately executes a structural inversion. He crosses his arms, putting his right hand on the younger brother Ephraim and his left hand on the firstborn Manasseh.
And Joseph actually tries to stop him, right? But Jacob refuses.
Because the physical action is necessary. The Hebrew word used to describe this intentional crossing of the hands is shakel, Strong's number H7919.
Shakal, H7919.
It shows that this structural skeleton, the transfer of authority and the engineering of the lineage, was intentionally physically cross-wired to fulfill a specific technological output. The hardware was being configured for the generations to come.
So let's look at what we've gathered so far.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have the legal authority through the signet ring in Egypt. We have the cryptographic name changes showing the shattering of the code.
Right, the Zaphanath-Paneah decryption.
We have the mechanics of the breath and the lip with the letter he. And we have the literal epigraphic proof of Manasseh's name carved into the teeth of the rock at Sinai, alongside mature poetic texts referencing the Hebrew calendar.
It's a mountain of evidence.
So what does this all mean for the overarching prophetic narrative of the Bible? I mean, why does this matter in the grand scheme?
It means that the rollout of the alphabet wasn't just a convenient cultural evolution.
It wasn't an accident.
It was a divinely engineered technological shift designed to fulfill exact biblical patterns. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the prophet Hosea.
Okay, Hosea.
In Hosea 11.1, there's a famous prophecy that is directly quoted again in Matthew 2.15 regarding Jesus. The verse says, "Out of Egypt I called my son."
Now, obviously, historically, that refers to the nation of Israel leaving Egypt, and later, Jesus returning from Egypt as a child.
That's the traditional understanding.
But our sources make a profound connection here regarding the alphabet itself, because when the Israelites finally leave Egypt in the book of Exodus, the text makes a very specific point to note that they packed up the physical bones of Joseph.
Yes, the Atzamot.
The Atzamot. They didn't leave him behind.
No, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. And the sources argued that this physical migration of bones perfectly mirrors the exact geographic migration of the bones of the alphabet.
I love that phrase, the bones of the alphabet.
Think about it. The 22 structural anchors of human communication, the literal skeleton of the written word, were extracted out of the Egyptian court, preserved through the desert by the Israelites, and assembled in the land of Canaan.
They were carrying the operating system with them.
They had to be moved to the Promised Land to become the physical substrate through which the ultimate logos would be recorded.
So when the prophet Ezekiel is given this bizarre physical command hundreds of years later, it all locks together.
Ezekiel 37, right?
Yeah, Ezekiel 37.1519. God tells Ezekiel to take a literal stick of wood and write on it for Judah, and then take another stick and write on it for Joseph.
2 separate sticks.
And then he is told to join them together into one single stick in his hand. What is the technological significance of that?
This is the macro-scale realization of the equation. Judah provides the covenant promise. Judah is the lineage of the Messiah. It is the hardware, the chassis.
But Joseph provides a multiplier.
Exactly. Joseph provides the multitasking physical infrastructure, the written alphabet. You need Joseph's alphabet to make Judah's word unified, solid, and readable in the hands of the people.
Which brings it all the way home to Hosea 11.1. Out of Egypt I called my son. How does the invention of the alphabet match this prophecy?
Because the Son is the manifest structural output of the living word.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Before the word could step onto the earth in physical flesh, it had to be extracted from the womb of Egypt as a pure, lightweight democratic script.
It had to be freed from the pagans.
It had to break the monopolistic back of the hieroglyphic world. Joseph purified the language so that all could know the word. The alphabet is the technological son called out of Egypt to prepare the way.
That is just incredible to think about. You're looking at the ultimate open source revolution.
It's the greatest gift to humanity.
The script was stripped of its pagan imagery, its complex idolatry, and its elite gatekeeping so that you, thousands of years later, could have direct access to truth without needing a priest or a scribe to translate a picture for you.
The alphabet is literally the operating system of freedom.
It is an engineered, low-entropy system designed to bypass the gate-kept imagery of the ruling class, allowing the direct voice and breath of the language to be preserved forever.
That's beautifully put.
So to recap the massive journey we just took,
We went deep today.
we moved from the heavily gate-kept 800-symbol hieroglyphic monopoly of Egypt. We explored Joseph's cryptographic mastery and absolute legal authority via the Chotham signet ring.
The CIO of Egypt.
We unpacked the incredible linguistic mechanics of his title, Zaphenath-Paneah, breaking the code from the locked M state of Safin to the explosive Q state of Naphat's.
Shattering the code.
And the breath of Yehoshaph bounded by the Safa of the lips. We saw that theory verified in solid stone by the Chakak engravings at Serabit el-Khadim, with Manasseh's name etched into the Shen, the teeth of the rock.
The receipts in the stone.
And finally, we arrived at the scriptural fulfillment of the word, the bones of the alphabet being called out of Egypt to prepare the way for the ultimate logos.
It is a completely unified thermodynamic and scriptural matrix that completely rewrites how we understand the history of communication.
Deep in the scorching, dusty turquoise mines of the Sinai Peninsula, carved directly into the cave walls, is the earliest record of the alphabet. For a long time, researchers believed these markings were the work of uneducated Semitic miners. The theory was that these workers, while laboring in the dark, looked at Egyptian symbols and guessed their way into a crude alphabet. But that idea faces a major problem. If this script were the result of trial and error by people who couldn't read, the caves should be full of failed attempts and half-formed concepts. Instead, this system appears suddenly, following consistent and sophisticated rules. Take this stone monument standing in the Sinai Desert. The writing here is highly structured. It isn't the work of someone guessing at a language. It is the work of someone who already knows exactly how to use it. Inventing an alphabet requires an advanced understanding of how sounds map to symbols. An illiterate laborer swinging a pickaxe in a dark mine likely lacked the high-level training required to engineer a system of linguistics this precise. A technology this clean suggests a mastermind operating at the peak of Egyptian society, and the historical evidence points to a figure with both the motive and the means, the biblical Joseph. To find the origins of this system, we have to look past the mines and into the heart of the Egyptian royal court. In Joseph's time, reading was reserved for the elite. Hieroglyphs are incredibly complex, requiring a student to memorize over 800 distinct pictorial signs. This complexity was a tool of control. It kept literacy and power exclusively with the pharaohs and their high priests. The new system changed everything by stripping away the illustrative details of Egyptian symbols. A complex picture of a house was reduced to a simple geometric line, and its only purpose was to represent the sound b. This reduction created a people's script. By condensing language into about 22 phonetic seeds, Joseph could bypass the elite gatekeepers. This simplified system meant that anyone, from the palace down to the mine, could learn to read and write in a matter of days. The evidence begins with this gold Egyptian signet ring. Genesis states Pharaoh placed it on Joseph's hand. This ring was a legal instrument authorizing every official document, making Joseph head of the royal bureaucracy with final authority over all written records. The biblical record in the Psalms even notes that Joseph was given the authority to teach wisdom to Pharaoh's senators. He was placed directly over the very class of people who held the keys to the Egyptian writing system. We see further evidence in the new name Pharaoh gave him, Zaphanath-Paneach. When we look at the Hebrew roots of that name, it translates to the revealer of secrets, or essentially the cracker of the code. Joseph held the legal authority of the signet ring and the intellectual mind of a decoder. He possessed the exact tools required to dismantle a complex system and build a new, democratic way to communicate. Returning to the Sinai mines, we can now look at high-resolution digital scans of the stone surfaces. Forensic analysis of these carvings has revealed details that were once invisible. On a specific monument known as Sinai 115, researchers have identified the carved name of Joseph's own son, Manasseh. These carvings aren't just names. They contain structured poetry and references to the Semitic calendar used by the Israelites. These miners weren't fumbling to invent a script. They were already fluent in it. They were using a system that had already been established and taught to them by Joseph's administration. Watch how this works. A complex Egyptian picture of an ox head is stripped down to its core sound. It becomes the letter Aleph, which eventually rotates into the letter A we use today. This 22-letter system allowed communication to move from the realm of elite imagery into the realm of pure sound. It removed the intermediaries, letting the common person hear the word for themselves. This was an administrative breakthrough. Once these 22 letters were used, they spread rapidly from Egypt across the entire world, forming the basis of almost every writing system we know. By stripping away the complex images of the Egyptian priests, Joseph provided a nation of former slaves with the exact tool they needed to record their history and preserve the Ten Commandments for thousands of years.
Let's go.
Imagine trying to read an email, but instead of using a simple keyboard, you have to memorize hundreds of detailed drawings. 4,000 years ago, that was the reality of information. Just look at this wall of hieroglyphs. To write even a basic sentence, you had to master a massive library of over 800 distinct, highly complex symbols. It took years of intense training just to learn the basics. Because the learning curve was steep, literacy was a superpower reserved for the top 1%. Only the pharaohs, the high priests, and elite officials had the time and resources required to read the law, record history, or access the state's data. These complex symbols acted as a lock on the gate of knowledge. By making the written word nearly impossible for a common citizen to master, the ruling class ensured that ultimate power stayed exactly where they wanted it, inside the royal vault. But far away from the golden temples, deep in the harsh, dusty turquoise mines of Serabit el-Khadim, archaeologists found something that didn't fit the elite system: the very first traces of a simple alphabet. Because these early letters were scratched into the walls of a mining camp, many scholars believe that uneducated, illiterate laborers simply looked at the Egyptian symbols and guessed at their meanings, inventing a new writing system on the fly. But there's a problem with that theory. If you are trying to invent a completely new way to read and write through trial and error, the cave walls should be covered in messy mistakes and failed experiments. Instead, the alphabet appears in these mines fully formed, with consistent, rigid rules already in place. A tightly organized, consistent communication system is a piece of high-level engineering. It suggests that someone didn't stumble upon it in the dark. They brought it there. This points toward a different architect, a brilliant, highly educated Semitic executive named Joseph, who had risen to the top of the Egyptian government. When Joseph was promoted to manage the nation's logistics, Pharaoh handed him the royal signet ring. That ring was the ancient equivalent of an ultimate admin password. It gave Joseph absolute legal control over the entire royal scribal bureaucracy. He was the one man who could authorize a change to the way the empire communicated. As a Semitic outsider who now controlled the keys to the Egyptian system, Joseph was in a unique position to take the elite tools of his masters and simplify them for his own people. Joseph's family and kin were laborers and shepherds, people who would never have the years required to learn 800 hieroglyphs. To give them a voice, he had to strip away the complex layers of Egyptian imagery. He treated symbols like a code. Taking the Egyptian hieroglyph for house, he stripped away the art into a simple, abstract outline. He assigned it the first sound of the Semitic word for house, bet. He compressed the massive library into 22 phonetic seeds. This was the ultimate open-source software. He had taken an elite system that required a lifetime of study and turned it into a simple app any worker could learn in days. We can see the intent behind this design in the language used to describe Joseph. In Hebrew, every word is built from a three-letter core that defines its fundamental meaning. Take Pharaoh's title for Joseph, Safan. This three-letter core means to hide or encrypt data in a secure vault. But reversing the letters flips the meaning. Reversed, they spell nafats, to shatter a boundary and scatter the contents wide open. This structural symmetry reflects Joseph's life. He was the man who understood the encrypted vault of Egyptian knowledge and chose to shatter its walls, scattering the power of the word to everyone. This recontextualizes the carvings found in those ancient mines. They aren't the messy birth of a new idea. They are the evidence of a successful deployment. The Semitic miners weren't guessing. They were using a mature, highly efficient system that had been designed for them and taught to them. Seeing these letters in the hands of common laborers in the desert proves that Joseph's open-source project worked. It had successfully bypassed the elite priests of the city. This invention shifted the balance of power. For the first time, communication didn't require expensive art or royal permission. By reducing language to simple, spoken sounds, the ability to record history and share ideas was placed directly into the hands of slaves, workers, and everyday citizens. Every text message you send and every book you read today relies on this exact technological foundation. While Joseph's grain management saved a nation from starvation, his work in the Scribal Bureau provided the technology that ultimately set the word free.
So, I want you to try something for a second. If you are looking at a screen right now, maybe, glancing at the show notes on your phone, or if you happen to be reading a book, just stop and really look at the letters.
Just stare right at them.
Yeah, literally focus on an A or a B, because we look at these shapes all day long, and there is this, overwhelming expectation of mundanity. We treat the alphabet as this completely neutral, passive tool.
Right. We just take it for granted.
Exactly. You assume that these squiggles are just the clumsy, messy result of thousands of years of human evolution, a linguistic accident that some ancient people eventually formalized, so we could write grocery lists, draft emails, send text messages, whatever.
Yeah, well, that is the standard view of human development. We tend to view our most foundational technologies, and make no mistake, the alphabet is a technology as these cultural byproducts, things that just organically oozed out of the mud of history through trial and error.
But what if we have been looking at this entirely backwards? What if the alphabet you are using at this exact moment wasn't a clumsy evolutionary accident at all?
It's a fascinating question.
Because according to the stack of sources we are diving into today, the letters you type with are actually a highly engineered, top-down piece of technological hardware. And even more provocatively, these sources suggest this system was specifically designed and deployed as a weapon to overthrow an ancient gate-kept elite.
Yeah, and if the theory we are examining today holds water, I mean, it completely reframes human history.
Totally.
When you stop looking at the alphabet as a lucky accident and start looking at it as an intentional, engineered algorithm of democratization, the entire socio-political landscape of the ancient world just shifts. You begin to see motives, strategies, and a systemic war over who gets to control information.
And that is the mission of today's deep dive. We are exploring an explosive theory buried in a mountain of historical, archaeological, and linguistic data. The theory proposes that the biblical figure of Joseph, yes, the historical figure famously known for the coat of many colors, was actually the master architect who extracted the world's first 22-letter alphabet from the heavily gate-kept chaos of Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Right. And we'll be evaluating the evidence that suggests his primary motive was to democratize communication. The theory argues that he gave his people a piece of cognitive technology so powerful that by the time Moses and the Israelites were marching out of Egypt in the Exodus centuries later, they weren't illiterate slaves.
Which is what we usually picture, right?
Exactly. But this suggests they already possessed hundreds of years of high-level literacy.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to say we have a massive stack of sources on the table today is an understatement. We are looking at advanced linguistic matrices. We have fresh archaeological epigraphy pulled straight from the ancient turquoise mines of the Sinai Peninsula.
And some incredibly deep scriptural analysis, too.
Yeah, analysis that, if our sources are correct, reads less like religious poetry and much more like a mathematical schematic.
Well, the lens we really need to apply here is purely analytical. Our sources propose that we look at ancient Hebrew not merely as a collection of mystical poems, but as a literal thermodynamic physics engine.
Which is just a wild concept.
It is, but they argue that this language is governed by a strict mathematical framework of kinetic energy and structural boundaries. And when you apply that specific framework to the historical narrative of Joseph, the correlations are unnervingly precise.
I have to admit, when I first read through the prep materials, my brain broke a little bit. It is a massive paradigm shift. So let's set the stage for you, the listener. Let's head to the historical battlefield of the first alphabet.
The Sinai Peninsula.
Right. For decades, the mainstream academic consensus has pointed to one specific location for the birth of alphabetical writing, which is the turquoise mines at Serabit el-Khadim, deep in Egypt. Archaeologists found these scratchings on the cave walls there, known as the Proto-Sinaitic script.
Right, the famous mine inscriptions.
Yeah, and the running theory in academia, often called the illiterate miner theory, suggests that uneducated Semitic miners working in the dark for their Egyptian overlords just sort of looked at the incredibly complex Egyptian hieroglyphs on the nearby temple walls and crudely invented an alphabet on the fly to write their own names.
Yeah, that is the textbook narrative. It posits a bottom-up invention, a grassroots, almost accidental linguistic evolution born out of sheer boredom or basic religious devotion in the tunnels of a turquoise mine.
Just guys with pickaxes getting creative.
Exactly. The assumption is that these laborers simplified the complex pictures into a workable alphabet.
But looking at the evidence presented in our sources, I have to challenge that academic consensus. It seems to defy basic logic. If you, as the listener, try to imagine a group of uneducated, illiterate laborers slowly inventing an entirely new revolutionary concept of written language by trial and error, shouldn't we see the evolutionary mud?
The failed prototypes, you mean?
Right. Shouldn't those cave walls be covered in dozens of failed half-baked attempts where they tried to make a symbol phonetic and it just didn't work? Instead, archaeologists found a highly sophisticated, perfectly functional script. Finding this perfectly working system in a mine and assuming the miners invented it from scratch is like finding a discarded microchip in a gold mine and assuming the guys with the pickaxes forged the silicon themselves.
That analogy cuts right to the heart of the problem. The illiterate miner theory fails systemically when you break down the actual cognitive demands of what it takes to build an alphabet.
Because it's not just drawing simpler pictures.
Not at all. To extract an alphabet from a hieroglyphic system, you have to successfully execute a highly complex linguistic maneuver called the acrophonic principle.
Okay, I am going to need you to break that down for me and the listener. What exactly is the acrophonic principle, and why is it so hard to pull off?
Let's visualize an Egyptian hieroglyph. Take the symbol for a house. In the Egyptian language, the word for house was pronounced PR, and they drew a top-down floor plan of a little dwelling to represent it. That symbol is a logogram.
Meaning it represents a whole word.
Yes, it represents a whole concept, a physical object, and sometimes multiple consonant sounds depending on the context. It carries immense visual and cultural baggage.
Okay, so it's a picture of a house that literally means house.
Correct. Now, to create the first letter of the alphabet using the acrophonic principle, someone had to look at that complex Egyptian symbol and mentally sever it from its entire cultural context.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they had to strip away its Egyptian meaning and its Egyptian pronunciation. Then they had to isolate the raw phonetic sound of the first consonant of their own Semitic word for house. The ancient Semitic word for house is bet.
Bet? Like the letter?
Exactly. So this engineer took the Egyptian picture of the house, completely deleted its original meaning, and reassigned it to represent only the raw phonetic B sound. They created a rule that said this symbol no longer represents a physical building. It is purely the B sound.
Which eventually gives us the letter bet in Hebrew, or B in English. I can see how taking a picture and stripping its meaning to just a sound is a massive conceptual leap. But why couldn't a clever miner just figure that out while staring at a wall?
Well, because of the systemic architecture required to do it 22 times perfectly. You cannot be an ignorant laborer guessing at pictures to build a closed-loop phonetic system. Executing the acrophonic principle requires advanced cross-linguistic phonology.
You have to know both languages inside and out.
Right. You have to deeply understand the structural mechanics of both the massive Egyptian scribal system, which had over 800 signs, and the phonetic boundaries of your own Semitic language. You need the macro-administrative statecraft training required to execute a systemic compression of information.
And a guy digging turquoise just doesn't have that.
An illiterate worker digging rock simply does not possess that cognitive architecture or the administrative oversight to standardize it.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't invent binary code by accident while swinging a hammer. It requires a systems engineer who sees the whole board. And that brings us to the alternative model presented in our sources, the Joseph model.
Which is a complete reversal of the standard view.
Exactly. This theory argues that the alphabet was engineered top-down, not bottom-up. It was designed by a highly educated, brilliant Semitic executive deeply embedded in the Egyptian royal court, Joseph, who then systematically passed this technology down to his people.
It completely shifts the paradigm of linguistic history. Under this model, the alphabet isn't a cultural accident. It is an intentional compression algorithm.
An algorithm designed to do what exactly?
It was specifically designed to strip away the elitist, ideographic gatekeeping of the Egyptian priests, compressing the entirety of human communication into roughly 22 simple phonetic elements.
If the sources are correct, this is wild, but it raises a massive historical hurdle. For Joseph to pull off the greatest technological shift in human communication, he would need unprecedented access and total unchallenged authority within the Egyptian empire.
He would need absolute power over the scribes.
Right. And if we think about the story, most of us know Joseph the dreamer, the arrogant teenager thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery, and then thrown into an Egyptian dungeon for a crime he didn't commit. How does a prisoner get the master keys to the Egyptian scribal system?
To bridge that gap, our sources urge us to look at the scriptural blueprint not merely as a dramatic biography, but as a highly specific record of a systemic forging process. Let's look at the phrasing in Psalm 105, verses 17 through 22.
Okay, what does it say?
The text describes Joseph's time in the Egyptian prison, but the Hebrew wording is striking. It says, "Until the time that his word came to pass, the word of the Lord tested him."
Tested him. That sounds like a pop quiz or, a trial of faith.
Well, the English translation softens it dramatically. The specific Hebrew word used there for tested is saraf. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, saraf is a metallurgical term. It literally means smelting, refining, or melting down raw ore in a crucible at extreme temperatures to burn away the slag and impurities.
Oh, wow. So the text is saying the dungeon wasn't just a holding cell where he waited out a sentence.
No, the prison was a thermodynamic forge. The text indicates that the word of the Lord acted as a literal refining fire that liquefied Joseph's internal psychological makeup. Think about who Joseph was when he arrived in Egypt.
A favored, arrogant teenager strutting around in a special coat, reporting his brother's mistakes.
Exactly. If you take that deeply flawed, egotistical teenager and instantly install him as the second most powerful man in the global superpower of Egypt, he immediately becomes a tyrant. The saraf, the violent smelting process of the prison, was designed to burn away the teenage ego.
It had to break him down to build him up.
Right. It left behind a pure, uncompromised administrative vessel capable of handling unparalleled weight without fracturing.
So it's less about punishment and more about preparing a piece of hardware to handle a massive, world-changing software update. You have to purge the corrupted files first.
That's a really fitting analogy. And we see the result of that smelting in verse 22 of that same psalm. It details that once Pharaoh released him, Joseph was given the authority to bind his princes at his pleasure and teach his elders wisdom.
The elders.
Yeah, the specific Hebrew words used are zaken for elders and chukim for wisdom.
Wait, let me stop you there. Teach his elders wisdom. He's a former Hebrew slave. Are we supposed to believe he's suddenly lecturing the Egyptian elite?
The implications are staggering when you understand Egyptian society. The elders and the wise men of Egypt were not just old men. They were the ancient, deeply entrenched priestly and scribal class.
The ones holding all the cards.
Exactly. They were the masters of the gate-kept hieroglyphic system, the keepers of all scientific and religious knowledge. The text explicitly states that Joseph was placed in an active role of instruction over them. He didn't just join the Egyptian scribal elite, he was installed as the teacher of the masters.
That is a phenomenal detail. And if we look at Genesis 41 in the source material, it gets even more tangible regarding his legal authority. Pharaoh elevates Joseph, and the text says he takes his royal signet ring from his own hand and puts it on Joseph's hand. Pharaoh says, "Without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt."
The signet ring is key here.
Right, because in modern terms, giving someone a ring seems ceremonial, like a key to the city. What did that mean in the Middle Kingdom?
Oh, the signet ring, the chatham in Hebrew, was the furthest thing from decorative jewelry. In the ancient bureaucratic statecraft of Egypt, the signet ring was the literal, physical instrument of law.
So it was like a rubber stamp for the empire?
It was used to press into wax or clay to seal, ratify, and authorize every single official document, decree, ledger, and piece of legislation in the empire.
Meaning whoever physically holds the ring controls the written word.
Yes. It granted him absolute, unquestionable authority over the royal scribal bureaucracy. No Egyptian scribe could ink a papyrus roll. No stonemason could carve a monument without Joseph's overarching legal consent.
Which answers the hurdle I raised earlier.
Precisely. The signet ring gave him the absolute political and administrative authority to innovate. He possessed the legal right to look at their 800-plus elitist symbols and decide, we are stripping this inefficient gate-kept system down. I am authorizing a new 22-letter script for my people.
Okay, if our sources are correct, we have this incredible evidence of Joseph possessing the legal authority via the signet ring, the linguistic training, and the cryptographic title to invent the alphabet. But let's ask the biggest question. Why?
The motive.
Right. Why did he go through all this immense trouble to invent a completely new way of writing? If he was already second in command of the greatest empire on earth, what was wrong with just using the Egyptian hieroglyphs to run the state?
That question cuts to the core of the theological and ideological war happening beneath the surface of the text. It wasn't just about an administrative upgrade or making filing easier. It was a profound spiritual shift. We have to deeply understand the nature of Egyptian hieroglyphs. They were ideographic. They inherently relied on visual pictures of the physical world. A bird, a snake, a human eye, a sun disk.
Right, they are literally pictures of material objects.
Yes, and more importantly, they were pictures of pagan gods. The Egyptian language was inextricably bound to their pantheon. Every time an Egyptian scribe wrote a sentence, even a mundane one about grain logistics, they were forced to draw the totems of the Egyptian gods.
You couldn't escape the religion.
Exactly. The language itself was tethered to the fallen, material, idolatrous world. It structurally echoed the exact practice that the God of the Hebrews would later strictly prohibit, which is the making of carved images. You literally could not write in Egyptian without engaging in visual, material idolatry.
Wow, I had never considered that. If you are a Hebrew and you are trying to write down a pure revelation from an invisible, non-material God, using a picture of a falcon or a jackal god to spell out the words is a massive, irreconcilable conflict of interest.
It's an incompatible operating system. The alphabet functioned as the ultimate technological solvent to dissolve that visual idolatry. By creating 22 purely phonetic, meaningless marks, the alphabet forced the human mind to make a massive cognitive and spiritual leap.
From the visual to the abstract.
Yes. Instead of looking at a picture of a bird and thinking of a physical bird, the alphabet forces you to look at an abstract squiggle on a page and translate it internally into a sound of breath.
A breath, like the breath of life, like the spirit.
Exactly the connection the sources make. It took human communication completely out of the visual, physical realm of pagan imagery and placed it squarely into the realm of the invisible. It moved writing into the domain of the spoken word, the logos. It forcibly shifted the human brain from passive idol worship to active auditory listening.
And if you think about the sociological impact of this on the common person, it is staggering. With hieroglyphs, you have an 800-plus symbol library. It takes a lifetime of elite schooling to master it.
Which means all power is concentrated.
Right. All political and religious power is entirely concentrated in the hands of the pharaohs and the elite priests. They controlled the flow of every piece of information. But a 22-letter alphabet, a commoner, a shepherd, a slave working in a brickyard, can memorize 22 sounds in a matter of days.
It was the ultimate weaponized democratization of knowledge. Hieroglyphs were explicitly designed to keep the masses in the dark, reliant on the priests. The alphabet was designed to bring the masses into the light. And historically, it was the necessary technological prerequisite for the Exodus.
How so?
Think about it. You cannot give a complex legal document like the Ten Commandments to a nation of 2 million illiterate slaves and expect them to build a functional, autonomous society based on the rule of law. The alphabet allowed a nation of former brickmakers to receive the law of God in a format that every single family could learn to read, debate, and teach for themselves.
They didn't need a high priest to gatekeep the law for them. They could hold the word in their own hands. And this brings in the ultimate theological fulfillment that our sources touch on, which ties this whole linguistic matrix together. In the New Testament, Jesus is referred to as the Yeshua Code, the ultimate kinetic Q-state release of salvation. And he's famously called the Logos, the Word made flesh.
This is where the structural encoding of the alphabet reaches its absolute apex. In the book of Revelation, Jesus makes a profound, definitive statement. In the Greek text, he says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega."
The famous quote.
But we have to remember the native Hebrew thought of the speaker. In Hebrew, he is saying, "I am the Aleph and the Tav," the first and the last letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
He isn't just saying he's the beginning and the end of time. He literally identifies as the alphabet itself.
He does. He is declaring that he is the entirety of the linguistic matrix. The alphabet was the necessary engineered technology to make the invisible word visible, transmittable, and accessible to the lowest servant in society. By stripping away the pagan imagery of Egypt, Joseph built the pure, uncorrupted phonetic vessel that would eventually be required to document the life, death, and resurrection of the Logos himself.
The vessel for the message.
Yes, the alphabet was constructed so the gospel could be read.
That genuinely gives me chills. The technology was built in advance so that the word could be universally known. Okay, if you're listening to this, hold on to your seats, because here is where the sources move from historical reconstruction to something that sounds like science fiction. Our sources claim that the evidence of Joseph's engineering isn't just in the history books. It is baked right into the structural code of the Hebrew language itself.
The physics engine.
Right. They reference this physics engine running in the background of the words. I'm going to be honest. Applying thermodynamic physics to an ancient language sounds like a massive stretch. Can you walk me through this Q-M=1 framework without the dense academic jargon? How does a sound have physics?
It required a paradigm shift in how we think about language.
Yeah.
Usually we think words are arbitrary. A dog is called a dog just because we agreed on it. But the Q-M=1 equation suggests that ancient Hebrew operates as a closed-loop, engineered system where the letters themselves are assigned physical thermodynamic properties.
Real physical properties,
Yeah.
like energy and mass.
Conceptually, yes. Let's break down the variables. Q stands for the Q state. These are specific letters that represent uncontained kinetic energy, forward trajectory, infinite potential, or fluid chaos.
Fluid chaos, okay.
If you want a real-world analogy, think of the raw, pressurized water flowing through a fire hose. Letters like aleph, or shin, or resh carry this Q state property. Even phonetically, a letter like shin, which makes a sh sound, requires an expulsion of breath, an outward release of energy.
Okay, so Q is energy on the move. Outward flow. What is the M?
M stands for the M state. These are letters engineered to represent structural mass, heavy physical boundaries, static containment, or restriction. Going back to our analogy, if Q is the flowing water, M is the heavy brass nozzle of the fire hose that restricts, shapes, and controls the flow.
The boundary holding the chaos.
Yes. Letters like ayin, tet, or tsad carry this heavy boundary-making M-state property.
And what about the equals 1 part of the equation?
The 1 represents absolute equilibrium, the perfect balance where the kinetic energy of the Q state is perfectly contained and utilized by the structural boundary of the M state, resulting in functional life, order, or perfect stability. You have the water, which is Q, and the nozzle, which is M, working perfectly together to put out a fire. That's 1.
That is a brilliant analogy, but I still need to see the proof. How does this energy and boundary concept actually show up in the vocabulary of ancient Hebrew?
It shows up through an incredibly precise mathematical mechanism called the reverse hinge, or in linguistics, bilateral metathesis. Because the language is proposed to be a closed, engineered loop, the thermodynamic state of an object is hard-coded into the sequence of its atomic letters.
Okay, stick with me here. What does that mean in practice?
If a two-letter Hebrew root represents an outward kinetic force, a pure Q state, the equation dictates that spelling those exact same letters backward will invariably yield the exact inward structural boundary an M state required to contain it.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I understand. You're saying if you spell a word backward, the definition doesn't just change to some random new word. It completely reverses its physical thermodynamic properties.
That is the claim of the matrix, yes. Let's test it with a verified example from the sources. We will take two letters, resh and sod. When you place them in that order, resh then sod, they form the Hebrew root rats.
What does rats translate to?
Rats means to run, to flow freely, or to move with high-velocity kinetic momentum. It is the definition of pure Q-state flow. You are moving through space with maximum freedom and energy.
Okay, resh to sod equals running freely. So if we apply the reverse hinge, we flip it 180 degrees to sod resh. What word does that make?
It forms the word zar, and zar means narrow, bound, an adversary, or a crushing trap. The flow is mathematically choked. The physical biology is trapped in a highly restricted, high-friction structural boundary.
Are you kidding me? Rats is running free and Zar is being trapped in a narrow snare just by looking at the word in a mirror.
It's incredible.
That level of symmetry is hard to dismiss as a cultural accident. And, you know, if we apply this to the historical narrative, the nation that enslaved the Israelites in Egypt is called Mitzrayim in Hebrew. And the root word embedded right in the middle of Mitzrayim is exactly that word Zar.
The correlation is profound. Egypt perfectly embodies the ultimate Tsar. It was the great snare, the narrow structural trap that choked out the kinetic breath, the Q-state freedom of the Israelites.
Yeah.
The entire narrative of the Exodus, therefore, is the act of breaking the Tsar to restore the rats. The historical narrative matches the phonetic physics of the spelling perfectly.
If you're listening, just think about the sheer architectural genius required to build a language where the spelling of the words physically acts out the history of your people. It's like the language itself is a dashboard reading out the physics of the universe.
It really is.
But let's bring this back to our proposed architect. If Joseph built this code, did he leave a signature? Do these reverse hinges apply to his own life?
The sources argue that he did, specifically encrypting his function into the titles and names associated with his administration. Let's analyze the new Egyptian name Pharaoh gave him when he was promoted, Zaphnath-Paneah.
Okay, let's break that down.
The first half of that title tracks perfectly with the Hebrew root Safan.
What is the definition of Safan?
Safan means to hide, to encrypt, to conceal securely in a vault. It represents the act of taking valuable information and locking it away behind a secure boundary.
Which is exactly what the Egyptian hieroglyphic system was doing. It was highly encrypted, vaulted knowledge, kept strictly away from the common people by the elite priests.
Precisely. Now, we applied what our sources call a trilateral inversion. We take the 3 root letters of Safin and we read them backward. When you flip the code, the word becomes nafats.
And what does nafats mean?
Nafats means to shatter, to dash to pieces, to violently disperse and scatter abroad.
I am genuinely speechless. Safin is to lock it up in a vault, and the exact reverse spelling, nafats, is to shatter the lock and scatter what's inside.
When you synthesize those 2 concepts, you are looking at the exact job description of a master cryptographer. A cryptographer's primary mandate is to take encrypted, gate-kept, vaulted data Safin and cleanly break open those restrictive barriers to distribute it as open, accessible knowledge, nafats.
That's Joseph's exact role.
Exactly. The phonetic spelling of his royal title mathematically describes Joseph shattering the locked ideographic system of Egyptian hieroglyphs to scatter the pure phonetic seeds of the alphabet.
The symmetry is just staggering. It's an operational manual hidden in his name. But that's only the first half of his title. What about the second half? Zephaneth Paneah.
The word Paneah acts as the ultimate cross-linguistic key. If you step outside of Hebrew and look at its direct Middle Kingdom Egyptian equivalent, it maps to the hieroglyphs Pa-Ankh. Pa means the, and Ankh is the famous Egyptian symbol for life or living force. Essentially, Pharaoh was naming him the one who controls the medium of life.
Okay, medium of life sounds incredibly majestic, but how does that connect back to inventing an alphabet?
We have to look at the intersection of fluid dynamics and ancient linguistics. In the broader Indo-Aryan language matrix, which shares deep phonetic roots in the ancient world, the equivalent sound pani translates explicitly as water.
Water.
Right. In ancient Near Eastern thought, water and life are intrinsically homorhythmic concepts. You cannot have biological animation, the ankh, without the fluid medium of water, the pani.
That makes sense. Water is the literal medium of life. And structurally, Joseph's job was literally managing the water supply and the agricultural output during a massive famine.
Yes. Consider Joseph's primary administrative function in Egypt, which was the total macro-regulation of fluid logistics. He managed the agricultural output of the Nile River's flood cycles. He gathered the chaotic, massive liquid grain surplus during the 7 years of plenty, a massive, uncontained Q state of energy, and he compressed it into static, heavy silo containment grids.
The M-state structural boundaries.
Exactly. He metered it out with mathematical precision to prevent complete biological collapse during the 7-year famine.
Okay, I follow the logistics of managing a famine, but bridging grain silos to creating an alphabet still feels like a leap. How do those 2 connect?
It connects through the concept of information management. The sources point out that the mind capable of controlling the fluid matrix of physical survival, gathering chaotic surplus, and compressing it into strict accessible grids, was the exact same mind equipped to compress the fluid visual chaos of 800 hieroglyphs into the stable, rigid, hyper-efficient seeds of a 22-letter alphabet.
Oh, I see.
He applied the exact same thermodynamic principles of compression and distribution to human language that he applied to the grain silos. He saved them physically with grain and technologically with the alphabet.
I see it now. It's all about mastering chaotic data and turning it into life-saving order. But let me stop you right here because I have to push back on one of the most famous details of Joseph's life. Right. Even if a listener has never picked up a Bible or studied history, they know about the Coat of Many Colors. It's a Broadway musical. It's a cultural touchstone. But honestly, the coat always just seemed like a flashy, arrogant gift from a dad who was playing favorites. How on earth does a multicolored fashion statement fit into this highly engineered thermodynamic language matrix?
It doesn't fit as a fashion statement.
Yeah.
And that is because the coat of many colors is actually a profound historical mistranslation that completely obscures its true function.
Wait, really?
Yes, we have to peel back the English gloss and look at the raw Hebrew phrasing. The specific term used in Genesis is ketonet passim.
Ketonet passim. If it doesn't mean a rainbow coat, what does it actually translate to?
A ketonet is simply a tunic or a long garment. The critical key is the one patim. The bilateral root of that word is pas. In ancient Semitic linguistics, the root passing literally translates to the palm of the hand, or more specifically in certain contexts, the hand that writes.
Wait, the hand that writes. So it wasn't about the colors at all. It was a tunic of the writing hand.
Yes. It was not a colorful gift to make his brothers jealous. It was a highly specific cryptographic uniform. In the ancient Near East, a garment with distinctly long sleeves that extended down over the palms of the hands at ketonet passim was the universally recognizable uniform of the elite scribal and administrative class.
So it was a status symbol, but for management.
Exactly. It visually marked the wearer as a manager who was strictly exempt from heavy manual field labor, precisely because their hands were reserved for the delicate intellectual work of holding a stylus and a papyrus roll.
Oh, this changes the entire psychology of the story. Jacob wasn't just giving his favorite son a pretty sweater. By giving him that specific coat, he was officially installing a teenager as the chief scribe, the record keeper, and the legal manager of the entire family estate.
It's a huge promotion.
No wonder the older brothers wanted to throw him in a pit. He was being placed in permanent administrative authority over them.
It completely reframes the family dynamic, from petty jealousy to a severe political and economic threat. But this is where the structural genius of the linguistic matrix reveals itself again. If we take that biconsonantal root for the writing hand, pas, which is spelled with the letter P, followed by the letter samek, and we apply the bilateral stripping protocol we used earlier, we flip it 180 degrees.
So we mirror it. We flip P samek to samek pe. What word does that yield?
It gives us the foundational root safar. Safar is the exact Hebrew word for the act of recording, counting, compiling a text, and acting as a scribe. In fact, the formal title for a scribe in Hebrew is a sofer.
My mind is completely blown. The exact 180-degree structural reverse of the physical organ that writes the hand, pas, is a conceptual act of compiling the written text itself, sephar.
Yes, the symmetry is perfect.
The spelling of the coat he wore as a teenager mathematically contained the physics of his ultimate destiny. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was the hardware marking him for the trajectory to become the ultimate scribe of the ancient world.
The sources suggest it is a fully engineered matrix. His uniform was the physical hardware, the prison was the forge, and his eventual role in Egypt was the software execution of the alphabet.
Let me push back here for a second. Enduring a prison sentence makes you humble. Sure, I get that. But does it make you a linguistic engineer? How do we jump from humble prisoner to the architect of the world's first alphabet?
Look closely at verse 22 of that same psalm. It says, Pharaoh released Joseph to, quote, bind his princes at his pleasure and teach his elders wisdom.
Teach his elders wisdom. I mean, couldn't that just mean he was a smart guy giving good advice on how to store grain for the famine?
It could, if we only rely on the English translation.
Yeah.
But the specific Hebrew words used here are very technical. The word for elders is zaken, which refers to the ancient ruling council, the senators, and the high priests of Egypt.
Okay.
And the word for wisdom is chakam. In this specific context, chakam isn't just moral philosophy or being a good person. It means administrative science, shrewdness, and structural engineering.
Wait, so the text is explicitly stating that a former Semitic slave was elevated to become the instructor of the Egyptian scribal and priestly class.
Yes.
The very people who gatekept the 800-character hieroglyphic system are now sitting in a classroom being taught administrative science by Joseph.
Exactly. And think about what that means. If you are teaching the masters of Egypt how to administer a society, you're operating at an intellectual altitude where you can easily evaluate their entire communication system and realize it is grossly inefficient.
Because you're the one running the numbers.
Right. You have the authority and the insight to say, this glacier of symbols is obsolete. We are going to extract the phonetic essence, strip away the pagan imagery, and create a 22-letter code to make this empire run properly.
That is a staggering realization. And there's another clue in Psalm 81, right? I remember reading that in the notes.
Yes, Psalm 81, verses 4 and 5. The text says, God ordained a testimony in Joseph when he went out over the land of Egypt, quote, where I heard a language I did not understand.
See, traditionally, people read that and just think, oh, Joseph heard the Egyptians speaking a weird language he didn't know.
But the Hebrew mechanics point to something entirely different. The word for testimony there is idut. An idut is not a spoken story or a verbal witness. It refers to a physical monument, a tangible witness, or a written law.
Oh, like the Ten Commandments.
Exactly. It is the exact same word used later for the physical stone tablets of the testimony given to Moses. So the text heavily implies God established a physical, written testimony through Joseph's administration over Egypt. And this resulted in a new unfamiliar language or a new manner of decree being established.
Okay, let's tie this all together because this is building to a massive historical climax. Joseph creates the alphabet. He has the brilliant mind, he has the legal authority of the signet ring, and he deploys it to the workers. What is the ultimate downstream effect of this technological breakthrough on the biblical timeline? Like, why is this crucial for the rest of the story?
Well, to see the immediate impact, you just have to look at the emotional climax of the Genesis narrative itself. Joseph is testing his brothers who have come down to Egypt for food, and for chapters, he pretends he doesn't understand them. He uses an interpreter to communicate with them.
And the Hebrew word for that interpreter is a militz, right?
Well,
That's human barrier.
Exactly. The interpreter is the ultimate gatekeeper. He stands between the ruler and the common man. But in Genesis 45, when Joseph finally breaks down and reveals his true identity to his brothers, he does something highly symbolic. He dismisses the interpreter. He says to his brothers, "Behold, your eyes see, in the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaks to you."
I love this connection so much. This is the exact spiritual definition of the alphabet. Think about the reality of the ancient world. Hieroglyphs were the elitist interpreter. They were a massive, convoluted barrier between the common man and the written record.
Yes.
If you wanted to know what the gods said or what the law said, you had to go through the priest. You couldn't just read it. But the alphabet dismisses the interpreter.
It completely eradicates the gatekeeper.
By creating a script that a common shepherd could learn in a week, the alphabet allowed the direct mouth and breath of God to bypass the pagan priesthoods and speak straight to the heart of the individual. It is my mouth that speaks to you. It's an incredibly intimate shift in how humanity interacts with truth.
And this transition isn't just a poetic metaphor for Joseph's life. It becomes a literal physical prophecy later in the biblical text. The research points to Ezekiel chapter 37, which is the famous prophecy of the two sticks.
The stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah. God commands Ezekiel to take a stick and physically write upon it for Judah, and then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph and join them together in his hand.
Notice the emphasis is on the act of writing. Judah holds the royal lineage of the Messiah, the flesh of the living word. But Joseph provides the structural, written infrastructure, the 22-letter alphabet, to make that word manifest, readable, and unified in the hands of the common people.
Which completely recontextualizes the Exodus narrative for me. If we connect this back to the grand narrative, the timing is just too perfect.
It really is.
Joseph establishes this democratized script. The Israelites live in Egypt for hundreds of years. The script is passed down through the clans. They use it at the Sinai mines, like we saw with the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions.
Yes. So by the time Moses leads them out of Egypt centuries later, they are not an ignorant, illiterate mob of slaves.
Right.
Thanks to Joseph's invention centuries prior, they are already a highly literate society. They are uniquely prepared for a textual covenant.
Which makes perfect sense. If Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments written on stone tablets and handed them to a population that couldn't read a single word, it would have been practically useless.
It would have meant nothing to them.
The people would have had to rely entirely on Moses or Aaron to read it to them. It would have just been replacing an Egyptian priesthood with an Israelite priesthood. The people would still be separated from the text itself.
But because of Joseph's alphabet, the direct relationship with the law was possible. Every Israelite man, woman, and child had the capacity to look at that stone and read the mind of God for themselves. The software had to be distributed to the population before the operating system could be downloaded at Sinai.
And Joseph was the engineer who ensured the hardware was ready. Okay, let's close the historical loop here. Let's bring the narrative back full circle to where we started our conversation, which was the hot, dusty turquoise mines at Serabit el-Khadim in the Sinai Peninsula.
Right. If we look at those ancient cave walls through this new framework of the Joseph model, the timeline suddenly snaps into perfect focus. Because Joseph instituted this democratized script in the Egyptian court during the Middle Kingdom, the Israelites didn't clumsily invent it while they were wandering lost in the desert during the Exodus.
Right. They had a massive multi-generational head start.
Exactly. By the time Moses and the Israelites were marching into the wilderness, they had possessed this alphabetical technology for hundreds of years. They had generations of time, from the era of Joseph's administration, to refine it, teach it, and become a highly literate society, long before they ever reached Mount Sinai to receive the law. Furthermore, the translations reveal complex references to specific, sophisticated Semitic calendars. The inscriptions specifically mention the month of Abib.
Abib, why is that important?
Abib is the exact calendrical timeline of the Passover detailed in the book of Exodus. They are writing about structured religious practices, agricultural cycles, and offerings, all utilizing this mature alphabetical code.
So, synthesizing this whole journey, the inscriptions at Serabit el-Khadim are absolutely not the evolutionary mud of a bunch of laborers trying to figure out how to write. They are mature, poetic monuments. They are utilizing a revolutionary, fully baked writing system that they had carried with them in their minds and on their scrolls right out of the slave camps of Egypt.
It is the physical, archaeological evidence of the Josephian mandate. It proves they were a literate nation of former slaves, carrying the democratizing technology of the Tav into the wilderness.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap the incredible scope of this deep dive, because we have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. We started by questioning the very letters you use on your phone every single day.
We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we've seen how, according to these sources, the ancient Hebrew language doesn't just arbitrarily describe things. It operates as a flawless physical and statistical matrix. The QM equals 1 equation balancing chaotic kinetic energy and structural mass perfectly, right down to the reverse hinges of the words.
The rats and the czar.
Exactly. We've seen how Joseph's life wasn't just a series of dramatic, unfortunate events, but a precise, systemic preparation. His psychological smelting in the prison forge, his cryptographic titles that mapped to shattering vaulted knowledge, and his scribal uniform were all executed to achieve one thing: the greatest technological shift in human history, the invention of the alphabet.
A technology designed explicitly from the top down to shatter elite political gatekeeping, replacing the idolatrous, gate-kept images of the Egyptian empire with the pure, invisible, democratic breath of the spoken word.
And that brings us back to you, the listener. Every single time you read a text message, every time you type out an email for work, or open a book to learn something new, you are not just using an accidental cultural byproduct, you are utilizing a profoundly democratic technology.
Highly engineered one.
Yeah, you are wielding a weapon of mass literacy that was forged in an ancient Egyptian prison, engineered specifically so that the common person, you and me, could hold the power of the word in our own hands.
Which leaves us with one final lingering concept to mull over. We've explored today how the ancient Hebrew alphabet acts as an exact mathematical mirror to the physical laws of thermodynamics, where simply spelling a word backwards reverses its physical state from kinetic freedom to narrow entrapment.
Right.
If that matrix is true, then language itself isn't just a passive neutral tool we use to describe the universe after the fact. What if language is the actual underlying source code that runs the universe? And if so, if your words carry that much physical thermodynamic weight, how carefully should we be using our own words today?
Man, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by looking at the harsh reality of the Sinai turquoise mines, and we dismantled the frankly illogical idea that illiterate laborers just stumbled into inventing phonetic linguistics on a lunch break. We walked through Joseph's structural refinement in the prison furnace, where his ego was smelted away. We explored his legal authority via the chatham, the signet ring, and how the physical mechanics of the Hebrew language point to his role as the great decoder and disperser of knowledge.
It's all connected.
And finally, we saw how his creation of the 22-letter alphabet prepared an entire nation to receive the written word of God.
It leaves you with a profound realization, honestly.
Yeah.
The basic tools we use for daily communication were forged in a high-stakes crucible of spiritual and political warfare. The alphabet is arguably the greatest monument to the human desire for universal access to truth.
And that leads me to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Next time you jot down a grocery list, or send a quick text message to a friend, or open a book to read a story to your kids, take a second to really look at the letters on the page.
Just look at the shapes.
Yeah, you aren't just looking at random scratches that evolved from cave drawings. You are looking at a brilliant compression algorithm. You are holding a piece of ancient, democratizing technology engineered by a captive in a foreign court, designed specifically so that one day the invisible word of the creator could bypass the gatekeepers and be held directly in the palms of your hands. Think about the incredible historical weight of the tool you are using right now. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the surface level of history, and we will see you next time.